Claire Thompson had always thought of herself as practical. She was the kind of woman who made lists, balanced grocery budgets down to the penny, and patched clothes until the fabric simply refused to hold another stitch. Practicality had carried her through her divorce, through the nights of crying behind a locked bathroom door so her daughter wouldn't hear, through the endless cycle of bills that seemed designed to break her. But practicality couldn't erase exhaustion. By day, she was a mother to 8-year-old Emily, walking her to school, packing lunches, helping with math homework, even when her own brain felt like sludge. By night, she worked at the downtown hotel, scrubbing floors, changing sheets, carrying trays up and down endless hallways. The pay was meager, but it was steady, and she clung to it because the alternative was nothing. The hours left her hollow-eyed. Most mornings, she stumbled home just as the sun rose, her uniform smelling of bleach, her muscles aching. Emily would greet her with sleepy hugs before school, and Claire would collapse for a few hours of restless sleep. Survival had become her full-time occupation. It was on one of those weary mornings, the sky still gray with dawn, that she noticed the suitcase. It sat near the dumpsters behind the hotel, half hidden under a torn plastic bag. At first glance, it was nothing. A battered brown case, the handle cracked, the fabric scuffed. People left junk there all the time, but something about it tugged at her. She paused, balancing her purse on her aching shoulder, and nudged it with her foot. It was heavier than she expected. For a moment, she hesitated. Logic said to leave it. Trash was trash, but exhaustion does strange things to the mind, and curiosity even stranger. With a sigh, she hoisted it up. The lock was broken, the zipper stuck halfway open. She carried it home, embarrassed by her own impulsiveness. Emily was still asleep when Claire set the suitcase on the kitchen table. She poured herself a cup of lukewarm coffee and stared at it. Why did it feel so significant? She tugged the zipper until it gave way with a reluctant groan. The lid creaked open. Inside lay folded children's clothes, tiny dresses, worn shoes, a faded sweater with a missing button. The sight struck her like a blow. She touched the fabric, soft with age, and felt an ache in her chest. Beneath the clothes were photographs, black and white snapshots curled at the edges, a young woman with tired eyes holding a baby, a little boy grinning beside a tricycle, a family posed stiffly in front of a modest house. And at the bottom, wrapped in a cloth, was a notebook. Claire lifted it gently, her fingers trembling. The cover was cracked leather, the pages yellowed. She opened it and read, April 12th, 1974. I don't know if anyone will ever see these words, but I need to write them. The nights are long, the money is gone, and the baby cries when I have nothing left to give. Sometimes I wonder if I am enough. Claire froze. She read on, the words blurring. The notebook belonged to a woman named Margaret, a single mother who had lived decades earlier. Each entry was raw, confessional. Margaret wrote about pawning her wedding ring to buy formula, about sewing clothes from scraps, about hiding tears from her children. Every word mirrored Claire's own private thoughts. She pressed the book to her chest, her breath shuddering. Whoever Margaret was, she understood. Across time, across circumstance, she understood. Mommy? Claire startled. Emily stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Morning, sweetheart, Claire said quickly, sliding the notebook aside. Emily patted over. What's that? An old suitcase, Claire said carefully. Someone left it by the dumpster. I brought it home. Emily peered inside. These are baby clothes. She picked up the tiny sweater, holding it against herself. Do you think they belong to a girl like me? Maybe, Claire whispered. Emily studied the photographs. They look happy. Claire wasn't sure if that was true. The woman in the photos looked weary, yes, but there was love in the way she held her children. Can we keep it? Emily asked. Claire hesitated. The practical part of her said no. Trash was trash, and their apartment was too small for sentimentality. But another part, the part that had cried over the words in the notebook, whispered yes. Yes, she said softly. We'll keep it. That day, after Emily left for school, Claire read the notebook cover to cover. Margaret wrote about finding strength she didn't know she had, about neighbors who gossiped but occasionally brought soup, about nights when despair nearly swallowed her, and mornings when the sight of her children's faces pulled her back. One line made Claire weep openly. I am tired of being told I am less, but when my child laughs, I am everything. Claire closed the notebook. tears streaking her face. For months, she had felt invisible, ground down by exhaustion, dismissed as just a cleaning lady or just a divorced mom. But Margaret's words reminded her that invisibility was an illusion. Mothers like them carried worlds on their backs. The following week, Claire tucked the notebook into her bag and carried it to the hotel on her night shift. During her break, she read by the dim glow of the staff room light. Another maid, Rosa, glanced over. "What's that?" Rosa asked. "A journal," Claire murmured. "From another single mom. Found it in a suitcase." Rosa leaned closer, curious. Claire read a passage aloud. When she finished, Rosa's eyes were wet. "That sounds like me," she whispered. They talked quietly, sharing stories, late bills, absent fathers, the ache of carrying everything alone. It was the first time Claire had admitted out loud how crushing it all felt. And Rosa didn't judge. She simply nodded because she knew. That night, Claire went home lighter. The suitcase became a quiet shrine. Emily arranged the photographs on the shelf, treating them like family portraits. The clothes stayed folded neatly, a reminder of children grown long ago. And the notebook. The notebook lived on the kitchen table, always open to a page that seemed to speak to whatever struggle Claire faced. When money ran thin, she read Margaret's notes on stretching food. When loneliness pressed in, she read the lines about finding laughter in children's eyes. When exhaustion threatened to break her, she read the words, "We endure because we must, and in enduring, we become strong." Each time, the words steadied her like a hand on her shoulder. One Sunday, Claire gathered her courage and invited Rosa and two other mothers from work to her apartment. She brewed cheap coffee, set out crackers, and placed the notebook in the center of the table. They read passages aloud, their voices cracking. They shared their own stories, broken marriages, long shifts, children who were both anchor and burden. Tears flowed, but so did laughter. By the end of the evening, something new had begun. Not just friendship, something sturdier, a circle. Claire didn't know it yet, but the abandoned suitcase had planted the seed of a community. And though her life was still hard, the edges no longer felt so sharp. She was not alone. The second meeting wasn't planned. Rosa simply knocked on Claire's door one Tuesday evening, her face pale and her eyes tired. "Can I sit?" she asked softly. Claire welcomed her in, poured a mug of tea, and soon Rosa was sobbing into her hands. The rent had gone up, her youngest was sick, and she had no one else to talk to. Claire fetched the suitcase, opened the notebook to a page she remembered, and read aloud. "There were nights I thought I would shatter. But then I remembered, if I collapse, my children collapse with me. So I stood, even shaking, even broken, and in standing, I healed." Rosa wiped her eyes. "That's exactly how it feels." Something shifted between them then. They weren't just co-workers. They were sisters in struggle. By the end of the month, 4 women gathered regularly around Claire's kitchen table. Rosa, Shonda from the laundry room, Maria from housekeeping, and Claire herself. They called it their circle, though Emily named it the Mom Club. They laughed at the name, but it stuck. The suitcase sat in the corner like an honored guest, the photographs displayed above it, the notebook always within reach. They passed it around like scripture, each woman reading lines that resonated. Margaret's words, written decades ago, became fuel for their survival. One entry they returned to often read, "I once thought weakness meant crying, but I've learned that crying is how you water the ground so new strength can grow." Every time they read it, someone wept. And every time, someone else reached across the table to hold her hand. Of course, not everyone understood. When Shonda mentioned the group to a coworker, the woman sneered. "A bunch of divorced moms crying over some dead lady's diary? That's pathetic." The words stung, but Shonda shrugged. Better to cry together than drown alone. Claire heard other whispers too. Her sister on the phone scoffed. "You're wasting time, Claire. What you need is a second job, not a book club." Claire didn't argue. She knew the circle wasn't about money. It was about survival of another kind. The kind that kept you standing when the world wanted you on your knees. One night, after a brutal double shift, Claire nearly canceled their meeting. She was bone weary, her hands raw from bleach, her back screaming. But when the women arrived, carrying casseroles and instant noodles, she forced a smile. They ate together, their children playing on the floor. Emily led them in a game of treasure hunt, hiding the suitcase under blankets and shouting clues until the other kids found it. When the laughter died down, Maria read an entry aloud. They said I should remarry quickly, that no woman can stand alone. But I know my worth is not in being chosen. It is in choosing myself and my children every day. Silence followed. Rosa whispered, I've been thinking of going back to him, even though he hits me, just so the kids have a father. The room stilled. Claire reached for her hand. Read that again, she urged. Maria repeated the words. Rosa broke down sobbing. They surrounded her, holding her until the storm passed. In that moment, Claire realized the circle was more than comfort. It was lifeline. It was power. Weeks turned to months. The circle grew. Other women joined, neighbors, co-workers, cousins. Soon Claire's tiny apartment couldn't hold them all. They met in the basement of the church, in borrowed classrooms after hours. Each time the suitcase came along, it became their symbol, their relic. Emily carried it proudly, as if it were holy. At meetings, they shared meals, swapped childcare, traded advice. Margaret's journal anchored them, but their own voices became just as strong. Bill's crushing me this month. Here I've got coupons. My ex is threatening court. Take my lawyer's number. He helped me. I'm so tired. Then rest. We'll watch the kids tonight. They were mothers, workers, fighters, and together they were unstoppable. One Saturday, Claire stood before the group and confessed something she'd never said aloud. When I first found the suitcase, I thought it was just junk. I almost left it there, but I think now maybe it found me. The women murmured agreement. Rosa wiped her eyes. It found all of us. Not everything was easy. There were arguments over who contributed more, over whether to open the circle to married women struggling too. There were nights when no one showed up, and Claire wondered if it had all been a fluke. But then someone would call in crisis. Someone would need babysitting or food or just a hand to hold. And the circle would reassemble as steady as the tide. Claire began to dream bigger. What if the circle could become something official, a support group, maybe even a nonprofit? She laughed at the thought. She was just a hotel maid with a second-hand suitcase. But then again, Margaret had been just a mother too. One evening, Emily climbed into Claire's lap, her small face serious. Mom, why do you read that book so much? Claire stroked her hair. Because it reminds me that even when I feel alone, I'm not. There were others before me. They fought, they cried, they survived, just like us. Emily thought for a moment. Then maybe someday, someone will read about you. The words struck Claire's heart like lightning. She had never thought of herself as worthy of being remembered. But Emily's faith made it feel possible. As spring bloomed, the circle organized their first public event, a community potluck. They cooked recipes from Margaret's notebook, clam soup, potato bread, pickled vegetables, and invited neighbors. People came, curious at first, then charmed. They asked about the suitcase, about the journal. Claire explained, her voice steady. It's a story of survival, and it's proof that none of us are alone. The potluck ended with children running through the grass, women laughing, neighbors lingering. The suitcase sat open on a picnic table, its contents displayed proudly. No longer trash, treasure. That night, after cleaning up, Claire placed the suitcase carefully by her bed. She traced her fingers over the worn leather and whispered, "Thank you, Margaret." Because of one abandoned suitcase, her world had changed, and she suspected it was only the beginning. Summer brought both light and shadow. The circle had grown so large that even the church basement sometimes overflowed. Mothers sat on folding chairs, others on the floor, children chasing each other around, while the women spoke of rent, court dates, nightmares, and dreams. Claire often stood back in awe. What had started with a piece of discarded luggage had become a movement. But success invited attention, and not all of it kind. One evening, as Claire and Rosa left a meeting, a man leaned against a lamppost, arms crossed. He was Rosa's ex, his smirk sharp as broken glass. "Heard you all been meeting," he sneered, filling her head with lies, telling her she don't need me. Rosa shrank back. Claire stepped forward, voice steady though her hands shook. "She doesn't need you to hurt her. That's not a lie." The man spat on the ground and stalked off, muttering. Afterward, Rosa sobbed. "What if he tries to stop me from coming?" "He can't," Claire said firmly. "We won't let him." Still, fear rippled through the group. If one man could threaten, others might too. A week later, the local newspaper ran a story about their potluck. It was meant to be kind, Divorced Moms Build Support Network. But some readers scoffed. Anonymous comments online mocked them. a club for failures. Maybe if they'd been better wives, they wouldn't need pity parties. The words burned. Shonda slammed the paper down. Why do people always want us small? Claire opened the suitcase, held up the journal. Because if we stay small, we're easier to ignore. But Margaret didn't stay small. Neither will we. The true test came in autumn. The landlord of their meeting space announced a rent increase. The church basement would no longer be free. The circle panicked. Without a place to gather, they risked losing everything. We can't afford it, Rosa said. Maybe we meet in homes again, Shonda suggested, though her apartment was already crowded. Claire sat in silence, Margaret's notebook open before her. She flipped to a page she hadn't noticed before. When the walls close in, build your own walls. They may be rough, but they will be yours. Her eyes lifted. We need our own place. The room erupted in disbelief. Impossible. We can't even pay rent. But Claire's voice didn't waver. We'll find a way. Piece by piece, just like Margaret did. The weeks that followed were grueling. They organized bake sales, sold handmade crafts, even hosted car washes with children waving signs on the corner. People laughed at first, but coins filled jars, then bills. Slowly, miraculously, they raised enough for a small storefront on a quiet street. The building was shabby, the paint peeling, but when they walked inside together, laughter and tears mingled. Emily twirled in the empty space. It's perfect. They named it the Circle House. The suitcase sat proudly on a shelf by the door, the first thing anyone saw when they entered. Around it, the women painted murals, bright colors, handprints of their children, quotes from Margaret's journal. We endure because we must, and in enduring, we become strong. The Circle House became more than a meeting place. It became a food pantry, a childcare exchange, a classroom where women taught each other sewing, cooking, budgeting. Reporters returned, this time with kinder words. Grassroots Support Network lifts families. Donations trickled in. Volunteers offered time. Yet Claire never let them forget their roots. At every meeting, she placed her hand on the suitcase. This started with one woman's story. Let's make sure our stories help the next. One evening, after a long day of organizing, Claire found Emily sitting by the suitcase, turning the photos over carefully. Mom, Emily asked, do you think Margaret's children ever knew how strong she was? Claire's throat tightened. I hope they did, but even if they didn't then, they know now, because we remember. Emily smiled. Then someday, people will remember you too. Claire kissed her forehead. Only if you help tell the story. Years later, when Claire looked back, she realized that the suitcase had not been an accident. Not truly. Someone had thrown it away, yes, but it had waited for her, for them. It was proof that survival leaves echoes, that one woman's endurance can ripple across time to save another. And so, when new mothers came, eyes hollow, voices trembling, Claire would open the suitcase, hand them the journal, and say gently, read, you'll see yourself here, and you'll see that you're not alone. They always cried. They always smiled through tears, and the circle grew, as unstoppable as love. On the 5th anniversary of the Circle House, the women gathered for a celebration. Children ran through the halls, now bright with murals and photos. A table overflowed with food, some from Margaret's recipes, some new inventions. Claire stood at the front, suitcase in hand. She opened it, showing the clothes, the photos, the journal. This, she told the crowd, was once trash, but it became our treasure. It became our beginning, and it proves that nothing and no one is ever truly lost. Applause thundered. Rosa wiped her eyes. Shonda hugged her tightly. Emily, now taller, squeezed her mother's hand, and in that moment, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not just survival, not just strength, but legacy. The suitcase had carried Margaret's voice across decades. Now it carried theirs into the future.